If you've ever wondered what it's like to risk everything for a forbidden love, this story is for you. Hit like if it made your heart race, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more raw, unapologetic stories of passion, courage, and truth. It was supposed to be the end. We had agreed in one of our many whispered, tear-streaked conversations that the next meeting would be our last. The affair had become too dangerous, too consuming. The risks were too high. But when she showed up at our usual hotel, wearing that familiar black dress that always made my breath catch, I knew instantly this was no ending. We didn't even speak at first. Our eyes met across the room, and that was all it took. She crossed the distance between us in seconds, grabbed my face in her hands, and kissed me like a woman starving, like someone who had been holding her breath for decades and was finally allowed to exhale. That kiss, that was the moment. The one kiss that made everything else unstoppable. The years of hiding, of self-denial, of telling ourselves that this wasn't real, all of it collapsed in that single desperate act of surrender. We tumbled onto the bed, tearing at each other's clothes, with an urgency that felt almost violent, as if trying to make up for every second we had wasted in the shadows. Our bodies knew each other now, intimately, confidently. But that night wasn't like the others. It wasn't just about lust. It was about claiming what had always been ours, but what we had never allowed ourselves to fully embrace. Afterwards, we lay in silence, our fingers intertwined, the city lights casting fractured patterns across the ceiling. "I'm leaving him," she whispered, her voice steady, certain. The words sent a jolt through me. For years, we had danced around this moment, both too afraid to say what we wanted, too tangled in our other lives to imagine something different. "And what about you?" she asked softly, turning to face me. I looked at her, this woman I had loved in secret for most of my life, and realized that the only thing more terrifying than losing everything was losing her. "I'm ready," I said, my voice breaking as the words left my lips. She smiled then, the kind of smile that made me feel like I could finally breathe. We knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be fallout. There would be judgment. There would be people hurt in the wake of our truth. But for the first time in decades, we were choosing to live, not just exist. Our love was no longer a secret affair hidden in the dark corners of hotel rooms and stolen glances. It was real. It was unstoppable. And it all began with that one kiss, the kiss that shattered our fears and set us free. The deeper we sank into our affair, the harder it became to maintain the illusion of normalcy. Every time I returned home to the quiet comfort of my carefully arranged life, it felt more like a performance than ever before. My husband, sweet and predictable, would kiss me on the cheek, ask about my day, and I would nod and smile, all while my body still ached for her touch, my mind still replaying the last time we made love in a darkened hotel room. The duality was suffocating. She confessed to me one evening as we lay side by side in the back seat of her car, parked in some secluded area far from prying eyes. Sometimes I wake up next to him, but I'm thinking about you. I wanted to tell her I felt the same, that my nights were now filled with dreams of her scent, her voice, the way her lips explored my skin with a mixture of reverence and hunger I had never known before. But saying it out loud would make it too real. So instead, I kissed her, fiercely as if the act could erase all the guilt, all the confusion that consumed me. The affair was no longer just about passion. It had become our refuge, the only space where we could shed the masks we wore for the world. Yet, as the months passed, cracks began to appear. There were moments when I caught myself staring at my reflection, wondering how I had become this woman, living a double life, deceiving those who trusted me most, and yet feeling more alive than I ever had before. At work functions, I could sense people noticing the subtle changes in me, the glow in my cheeks, the distant look in my eyes. My friends would ask if something was going on, and I would laugh it off, claiming I was just busy, just tired. But inside, I was crumbling. One evening, she surprised me by showing up unannounced at my house. My husband was away on a business trip, and I had mentioned it in passing days before. When I opened the door and saw her standing there, drenched from the rain, I felt both terror and exhilaration. "What are you doing here?" I whispered, pulling her inside. "I couldn't stay away," she breathed, before pressing her lips to mine. We didn't make it to the bedroom. We made love right there on the living room floor, surrounded by the artifacts of my other life, family portraits, the wedding china on display, the framed certificates of a life I had so carefully curated. When it was over, she lay with her head on my chest, tracing circles on my skin, while I stared up at the ceiling, my heart pounding with both satisfaction and dread. "This can't keep going," I said quietly, though my arms instinctively tightened around her. "I know," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. But neither of us moved, because even as we acknowledged the impossibility of our situation, neither of us could bear to give it up. We were trapped in a love we had hidden for decades, now unleashed, untamed, and consuming everything in its path. The morning after that kiss, everything was different, and yet nothing had changed at all. We still played our roles in public, still exchanged polite smiles at community events, still maintained the veneer of two respectable, mature women with separate, perfectly constructed lives. But beneath the surface, the dam had broken. We had awakened something neither of us could put back to sleep. That first kiss led to a second, and then a third. Within weeks, we found ourselves tangled in hotel sheets, sneaking away from our routines for stolen afternoons, drenched in sweat and whispers. The affair we had denied for decades was now unstoppable. But with that release came the weight of consequences. I remember sitting in my office one afternoon, staring blankly at my computer screen, her lipstick still faintly staining my collar. My phone buzzed with a message from her. "I can still taste you." My stomach tightened with excitement, with fear. Every moment with her was ecstasy, but every moment apart was agony, filled with the dread of discovery. Our families, our friends, our entire social circle, none of them would understand. They saw us as paragons of propriety, the elder stateswomen of our community, not lovers driven by insatiable desire. And yet, we couldn't stop. Our meetings became more reckless. We rented secluded cabins on weekends, checked into out-of-town motels under false names, always careful, yet always on the brink of exposure. There was a particular afternoon I can't forget. We met at a hotel an hour outside the city. The moment I walked through the door, she grabbed me by the waist and pushed me against the wall, kissing me with a hunger that made my knees weak. Clothes fell away in a blur of desperate hands and mouths that knew exactly what the other needed. Afterwards, we lay there in silence, our bodies tangled, our breathing slow. She traced lazy circles on my thigh and whispered, "We should have done this years ago." I smiled, but there was a knot in my chest. Because I knew what she was really saying. We've wasted so much time. And she was right. We had spent decades living in fear, hiding our love in the shadows, letting society dictate who we could and couldn't be. Now that we had broken free, we realized how much we had been deprived, not just of each other, but of the chance to live authentically. But freedom comes with a price. One evening, as we sat at our usual quiet cafe, her phone buzzed incessantly. Her husband was looking for her. My own partner had called me twice already that day. We shared a long, heavy look, the kind that said everything neither of us dared speak aloud. This couldn't last forever. Something, someone, eventually would break. But for now, we were willing to risk it all for another night, another kiss, another chance to feel alive. After that night beneath the streetlights, something fundamental between us changed. The rules we had so carefully abided by for years were now nothing more than thin, fraying threads, barely holding us together. Every interaction became charged, every look, every word dripping with a tension that neither of us could suppress anymore. Days later, she invited me over for dinner. A simple gesture, something we had done countless times before, but this time felt different. There was a hesitation in her voice, a crack in her usually flawless composure. I told myself it was just dinner, but the pounding in my chest as I walked up to her door betrayed my own delusion. She greeted me with her usual confidence, but her eyes betrayed her. They scanned my face, my body, then quickly averted, as if terrified that if she looked too long, she might give herself away. The apartment was dimly lit, the faint scent of jasmine drifting from a candle on the coffee table. She poured us wine, her fingers brushing mine as she handed me the glass. A contact so fleeting yet so incendiary that it left my skin tingling. We made small talk at first, pretending that this was just another evening between friends. But with every sip of wine, every stolen glance, the pretense grew thinner. The air around us thickened, weighted down by years of repression and the raw, aching desire we could no longer disguise. At one point, I stood to admire the view from her balcony, needing distance, needing air. She followed me silently, standing close enough that I could feel the heat of her body, but not touching me. The city lights flickered below, but all I could focus on was the sound of her breathing, shallow and uneven, mirroring my own. "You're cold," she said softly, draping her shawl over my shoulders, her hands lingering a moment too long. I turned to thank her, and that's when it happened. Our eyes locked, and everything else fell away. The city, the years of restraint, the people who would judge us, none of it mattered in that instant. My hand found her waist as naturally as if it had always belonged there, and she leaned in, closing the final, unbearable distance between us. Our lips met in a kiss that was both tentative and ravenous, as if we were tasting freedom for the first time and terrified it might be snatched away. It wasn't soft. It wasn't careful. It was desperate, urgent. Two women who had waited far too long, finally giving in to everything they had denied themselves. Her hands tangled in my hair as I pressed her against the balcony railing, the night air cool against our flushed skin. The kiss deepened, growing more intense, more consuming with every second, until we both had to pull away, gasping for breath. She looked at me, her eyes wide with shock and something else, something feral. "We can't," she whispered, but even as the words left her mouth, her hands were pulling me back in, and I didn't resist. That kiss shattered everything. It was no longer a question of if we would cross the line. We already had. The only question left was, how far were we willing to go now that we had finally given in? For years, we existed in the same orbit, always close enough to feel the pull, but never daring to touch. We were two mature women, respected in our careers, envied for our independence, and quietly admired for our elegance. The world had its version of us, carefully crafted through decades of restraint and well-rehearsed smiles. But behind those polished facades, a pact had been silently made, a promise to never cross the line that divided friendship from something far more dangerous. Our affair began long before the first kiss. It started with late-night conversations over wine, when our words would linger too long in the air, thick with unspoken meaning. It was in the way she would tilt her head to study me, her eyes lingering on my lips as if they held the answers to questions neither of us could ask. She was everything I feared and everything I craved. Strong, unapologetic, with a voice that could make me shiver just by saying my name. But we both knew the risks. We had built entire lives, with families, careers, and reputations too fragile to withstand the fire we kept smothered deep inside. There was an unspoken rule between us. Desire could exist, but only in the spaces where no one else could see. In the accidental brush of our hands when passing a document, in the lingering scent of her perfume left on my scarf after a friendly embrace. These small moments became our secret language, a code of intimacy that neither of us dared to fully decipher. But time is a merciless thief, and as the years passed, those stolen moments no longer satisfied the hunger that had been growing between us, quietly but relentlessly. Every shared glance became more loaded, every accidental touch more electric. The silence between us screamed louder with each passing day, until it was almost unbearable. I remember the precise moment when I realized I couldn't keep pretending. We were at an event, surrounded by colleagues, sipping champagne and exchanging polite laughter. But when her hand briefly grazed the small of my back as she leaned in to whisper something utterly mundane, my entire body ignited. My skin burned with need, my heart pounded with the ferocity of a woman who had denied herself for too long. That night, after the event, we stood outside beneath the streetlights, the city buzzing quietly around us. She lit a cigarette, something she hadn't done in years, and exhaled a slow, deliberate cloud of smoke. "We can't keep doing this," she said, her voice hoarse with restraint. I nodded, not trusting my own voice to agree or to protest. But neither of us walked away. Instead, we stood there, suspended in that impossible space between fear and longing, between what we owed to the lives we had built and what we owed to ourselves. It was the first crack in the dam, the first undeniable sign that the pact we had made to live in the shadows was beginning to crumble, and neither of us was ready for what was about to be unleashed. For decades, we hid in plain sight, our glances stolen behind closed doors, our fingertips brushing only when no one was watching. The world saw two respectable older women, colleagues, neighbors, even friends, but they never knew the truth. The truth about the nights drenched in sweat and whispered promises, about the decades of forbidden touches and unspeakable desires. And then, one night, one kiss shattered every boundary we had sworn to protect. From that moment, there was no going back.